In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of men can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is common sense.
I'm Mark Zaccaria.
I'm April Giarrusso. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. This week, as we close out January and start to really see how the state legislature is shaping up in the new session, our show will take a more careful focus on some of the real issues facing Rhode Island, what might be done to manage them, and what will be actually done. We'll hear from Representative Patricia Morgan as she conducts an in-depth interview with Small Business Association of New England's own Ralph Coppola as they discuss the Rhode Island Economic Summit from a couple of weeks ago. Between segments, Mark and I will reappear to bring a satiric twist to some of the political theater we see here in Little Rhodey. As usual, our stepping off line will be, "Are you kidding me?" Commentator Jeff Richard will close out the program with his insights on car insurance and the future of privacy. And by the way, folks, if you're watching this broadcast on Pro Bowl weekend, please remember that Common Sense is celebrating its first anniversary on the air at a reception this Sunday. Cast, crew, and the audience will gather in real life at Perella's Restaurante on Metacom Avenue in Warren, Rhode Island, from 1 to 3 on Sunday afternoon. Join us if you can. Tape your own Are You Kidding Me segment right there, and help us make the first turn and head into our second year of production. For right now, though, we'll kick off this 52nd edition of our show with analysis of some of the top news stories affecting Rhode Islanders today. Mark?
Thanks, April. I'll see you again on Sunday.
You will.
For now, though, let's re-examine the move General Electric Corporation made to leave Fairfield, Connecticut and relocate its headquarters to Boston. GE departed Fairfield in 2015 for exactly the same reason it moved there from Lexington Avenue in New York City in 1974. To paraphrase New York mayoral candidate Jimmy McMillan, the rent was too damn high. In New York, in the 70s, a nearly bankrupt city government was demanding more and more of its taxpayers, while the surrounding infrastructure, governmental services, and crime statistics were all getting progressively worse. In 2015, in Fairfield, Connecticut, all those same things were happening with a state government that's also financially underwater. The Hartford legislature kept squeezing a big taxpayer until it did what it said it would do. So for this article, I can't refer to Connecticut as the Constitution State. No, today I have to use its other nickname, the Nutmeg State, because they're nuts. What were they thinking? Now, it's really touching that Governor Raimondo thought out loud that we could get that corporate plum as soon as she heard the game was afoot. The reality, of course, is that the Ocean State never had a chance. As Aaron Wren pointed out in Go Local Prov last week, the faces of corporate headquarters staffs have changed over the years. As technology has become an industry, the skill sets of the command center teams in the corporate world have evolved towards high tech. They've also benefited greatly from the incubator effect of being in personal touch with those possessing other parallel technical skills. In other words, we are seeing the rebirth of the urban environment as the best place for best practices in the corporate senior management sector. Take a look at the university structure, the cost structure, the structure of public finances, and the resulting ambiance in Boston, and you'll quickly see there is no comparison here in Rhode Island. Folks, the fact that GE leapfrogged the Ocean State to find a better corporate environment in the nearby Bay State should be a cautionary tale for our political leaders up on Smith Hill. Much has been made of the poisonous business environment here, but all that commentary has come from outsiders like me. Meanwhile, the privileged class of Rhodey insiders has continued to kill all geese that might lay golden eggs because their short-term vision is about getting theirs today, not providing for ours tomorrow. As long as that continues, Rhode Island will be a loser, not a winner, in the corporate sweepstakes. April?
Thanks, Mark. Here in Rhode Island, we have no shortage of cautionary tales. So listen up, Providence, this one's for you. In recent weeks, we've been hearing a crescendo of wails and howls from Flint, Michigan, on the subject of their contaminated water system. Political opponents of Governor Rick Snyder have been feeding publicly on his entrails because it was he who was appointed Flint's then emergency manager, Edward Kurtz. It was Kurtz's decision to leave the Detroit water system early and temporarily use water from the Flint River for the 2 or 3 years it would take for the planned Carignan Water Authority to begin supplying the city's needs. By now, everyone knows the river water leached lead out of Flint's aging pipes and contaminated the entire supply, perhaps irreparably. Blame has also been aimed at the state's Department of Health, whose job it was to monitor water quality during the transition. In fact, blame has also been aimed at lots of other sources as state government tries to untangle this technical mess amid a firestorm of political fallout. Without doubt, though, one of the major contributing factors to this disaster was the unsupportable financial burden on Flint's city government to keep up with pension payments and other post-employment benefits. It turns out the estimated $5 million per year saved by changing water sources was desperately needed to plug the other financial hole. Do you see where I'm going here, Providence? I told you this would circle back to you. Here in the Ocean State, our own capital city is so far underwater in its pension fund that it too will soon be grasping at straws to limp through every budget period and still make good on its promises to retirees. As the Elorza administration tries valiantly to ignore the problem, financial guru Mike Riley's strident words of warning keep ringing in their ears. So far, Riley's analysis hasn't distracted them from saying it isn't so, but the example of Flint, Michigan should be top of mind for Providence planners because a similar fate awaits them unless they grow some backbone and face the music. There are only ugly political options open to the Elorza team by now. Let's hope they opt for heroic leadership and start grappling with their money problems right now. If they don't, they could stumble blindly into a problem like Flint's where thousands of citizens are put in real danger. Mark?
Thanks, April. I think. Last week, we finally saw the results of the long-awaited Brookings Institution study entitled Rhode Island Innovates. This analysis was called for by the governor to help us chart a course back to economic vigor. At its release, the nearly 200-page study was summarized by its authors. They cited old-line manufacturing markets that have disappeared as a key cause for the decline of business in the Ocean State. They also highlighted more high-tech service and manufacturing segments that were said to be growing today. These were STEM, S-T-E-M fields, or science, technology, engineering, and math. Of particular interest within this general category were biomedical innovation, IT software, cyber physical systems, and data analytics, defense, shipbuilding and maritime, advanced business services, design, food, and custom manufacturing. The study's lead author, Bruce Katz, listed some ballpark estimates on investment costs to get Rhode Island economy operating in these new segments. But he did not offer any cost-benefit analysis. That, coupled with his use of language such as new federalism, where decision-making is pushed down to its most grassroots level, might make free marketeers think the government is about to step back and let the entrepreneurs have at it. Anchor Rising blogger Justin Katz, no relation, writing in the Providence Journal, dispels that misconception quickly. Looking back at some of Bruce Katz's other work for Brookings, the blogger cites a 2008 paper on transformative investments that proposes to show how free market investments fail when compared to centrally planned economic systems. The Brookings fellow also indicates in that work that, quote, the federal government would lead on what matters, unquote, presumably leaving state and local governments in a position more akin to employees following orders than to sovereign leaders representing the interests of the communities that they know best? And where are the entrepreneurs, their energy, and their private investments? Upon reporting this connection, Justin Katz was reminded that the federal government specified that Rhode Island Planning use a consultant named Policy Link to help with polishing the plan that it later released as Roadmap RI. Without the voltage of individual ownership and reward for effort expended, the plan Brookings really tried to float last week will never meet any of its objectives. That's because none of the troops in the trenches will have any incentive to go the extra mile to achieve them. In the old Soviet Union, the oft-repeated joke was that the state pretends to pay us, so we pretend to work. Bruce Katz would push back and claim that while he believes central planning is more efficient, he has no designs on eliminating private ownership. Okay, in the 20th century, central planning by government to impose requirements on titularly private production companies was called fascism. So what do you really have planned, Brookings? And what elected official in his or her right mind would try to implement it? April?
Thanks, Mark. To date, it doesn't seem there's an awful lot of happy in this Happy New Year. So what do you say we apply some real American humor to the proceedings? Just before we move on to Representative Patricia Morgan's first segment, let's take a time out to ask, are you kidding me? The General Assembly is back in session, and new bills are being filed daily as legislators work diligently to further control and direct the daily lives of Rhode Islanders. Many of these proposed new laws have obvious value as updates or technical tweaks to the existing legal system. Some of these filings are questionable at best and represent unnecessary meddling. Do you think we should highlight some of these stinkers? Are you kidding me? Let's kick off this new legislative season with a look at House Bill 7046. It was submitted by Representatives Lombardi, Zaccaria, Hull, Slater, and Diaz. The proposed statute prohibits the sale or delivery of hearing aids within the state via internet or mail. If this one is enacted, I guess none of us need bother with that page on Amazon.com. Absent any concerns over health and safety, the only thing this law would do is artificially increase the cost of hearing aids for Rhode Islanders and probably decrease the number of models available. Why would these reps consider it important to restrict their constituents' opinions or options when it comes to these innocuous and benign devices? Could it be that they're trying to protect an existing brick-and-mortar retail trade, even at the expense of making it harder for the hearing impaired to find relief? Sure sounds like it. Once again, we get a picture of who our reps really represent, and it ain't us. Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is the program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and today we have with us a returning guest, Ralph Coppola from the Small Business Association of New England. And Ralph, did you know this is our 52nd episode?
Wow, that's great.
Yep, 1 year. We've been doing this every week for 1 year, and this is it. And you've been in it twice. Pretty good.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that because it's been a kind of a labor of love coming every week and making sure that we have a quality program for our viewers. And I appreciate that you came to celebrate our 1 year anniversary.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Ralph, the Small Business Administration had a summit.
That's correct.
At Bryant University recently, where you had about 200 participants from the small business community as well as legislators and some people from the general public. And you were focused on what Rhode Island is doing right and what Rhode Island is doing wrong and what we could possibly do better. Correct?
That's correct. Our focus is primarily on ideas that we think and changes that we need that would benefit the business community and make doing business in Rhode Island a lot more smoother and easier than it currently is. That was our main focus. So yeah. There was some great ideas. I think one of the things that everybody paid particular attention to.
Well, before you go there, I mean, it's been hard for the small business community, for the whole business community in Rhode Island. I like to think of it not being the business climate, I like to think of it as being the jobs climate, because the majority of our jobs come from small businesses.
That is correct. Right?
Do you happen to know what the percentage is? It's like 80% or something of the jobs.
In the Rhode Island it is. It's very high. I think you're correct. It's in the 75-80% area, and I think there's somewhere around 40,000 small businesses in the state.
40,000. So without a good business climate, we don't have a good jobs climate either.
That's correct.
And we need to do what we can to take the impediments off of our economy. I mean, when you're ranking 47th, 48th, 50th, it's not good.
No,
it's not good for our small businessmen at all.
We've been moving up a little bit, which is very positive, but we still have a long way to go.
Long way to go. But we need to really tackle it because our citizens, their children, their grandchildren, all depend on us having a really good jobs climate here. Something where we've taken the regulations off, we've made it easier for them to exist.
That is correct.
So now, my understanding is you had, 6 different subcommittees at the summit?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you know what they are?
taxes.
All right.
Health, emerging market, economic development, Main Street, and education,
Okay.
or workforce development.
Workforce development and
Which is
education
the
is the same
education.
thing.
That's
okay.
correct.
A lot of people don't often think of education as being a business climate topic. And yet, whenever the small business community, I know the manufacturers in particular, have been saying for a long time, we have jobs and we can't find people to fill them because when they're getting out of high school, they don't have the skills.
Correct.
Are they talking about high-level skills, or are they just talking about the basics, reading, writing, math, the ability to follow directions?
I think it's more
Curiosity.
Yeah, that's more towards the basic skills than the high-level skills. The high-level skills that's a whole different marketplace where ultimately, those particular people are usually placed by professionals in that particular situation. So this is more of the company's looking for skilled employees that can come in and do the work that needs to be done in maybe manufacturing or some type of distribution or any type of organization that you need a certain degree of training, you need a certain degree of skills to do that particular job.
But they're willing to take entry-level high school students and train them themselves if they have the basic learning skills.
Yes, and there are some other skills that are a little bit more than
Computers.
basic that need to be. Computers are one of them, for an example, and some mathematical skills that even is a little bit higher than your basic math. But these are some of the skills that really have to be developed, and that's where workforce development has been working on career technical education, and trying to centralize that more and have more of a statewide curriculum, and put more, have the business community more in contact.
More as a partner.
As a partner in that particular area, so that they can work with the various institutions to guide them on the skills that they're going to need for the jobs that they have available or coming available as they grow.
Yeah, I know, what was it, like 2 years ago, we actually passed a bill that created this partnership between the business community and our career and technical centers, as well as CCRI was in that mix, I think, so that
I believe you.
So that students could start getting the basic skills of just basic educational learning skills, but also have some introduction into those higher level things like, I'm trying to think for my own.
I mean, carpentry is a skill that needs. They just give it
process improvement,
computer running a machine that's computerized.
Diagram reading, whatever is out there that they need to know.
Correct.
To know, and I know that CCRI has really been trying to engage in that as well, to offer those when you get out of high school, a kind of a continuum of your learning.
Correct. Yeah, we're trying to get towards. I guess there's some movement trying to get towards a 2-year associate's degree in specific types of jobs, so that you have you don't need a full degree for that particular position. However, an associate's degree will give you the skill level that you will need. So we're seeing more of that, and that's kind of the European model when you think about it, where
kind of an apprenticeship.
Yeah, your apprenticeship, and you train the person for the job. So it's obviously worked there successfully, and we need to basically utilize it here more often so that we can get the right people for the right position.
Well, I know that was really slow. I mean, we passed the bill but said it really couldn't happen for another year. So I think this is the year when the business community actually gets their hands in there and gets to start suggesting curriculum and making some of those changes that are necessary for them to get the kinds of workers they need.
Yeah, there's some movement on that, and Gary Ozowski, who's part of the one of the committee, who chairs one of the committees. Actually, he chairs the regulation committee, which we missed originally, but he's the chair of the regulation committee. He's working on that with a few other individuals, John Gregory and a few other people. So it's not moving as quickly as everyone had hoped, but it is moving forward, so that's a good sign.
Well, I hope that they are successful because it is really disturbing, I think, to hear that we have jobs that go begging for workers, right? The recent park scores, I think, should have been kind of a wake-up signal that something is broken here when we have 5%, 10%, 15% proficiency in some of our school districts. When you're not proficient, you're not ready for work.
You're not. That's true.
You're not ready for your adult life.
That's true, and it affects the economy also.
Yep, it affects the jobs climate, right? Which is what we are really interested in finding out more about. But right now, we're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back.
Just last week, Common Sense reported on Governor Gina Raimondo's travel schedule for her first year in office. We cut her some slack, recognizing that in a connected world, there could be valid reasons for her work to take her out of state. Then this week, it was announced that the governor was off to Davos, Switzerland, to attend the annual International Economic Summit. Are you kidding me? Come on, Governor. Visiting Wall Street to keep in touch with your sources of bond revenue is one thing, but taking $7,000 in private funds to hobnob with the rich and famous at an event completely unrelated to your job is like fiddling when Rome burns. Projo quoted KPMG CEO John Weimeyer as justifying Davos by saying, quote, "A lot of relationships are built and renewed," unquote. Well, maybe if you're the top guy at a global consulting practice that makes hundreds of billions per year for its clients and takes in tens of billions for itself in the process. But what if you're the rookie chief executive of a teeny public entity whose finances are underwater and whose only source of income is squeezing more blood out of its quickly departing citizens in the form of taxes, fees, and, oh yes, tolls? Do you go there to teach others how to become Rhode Island? In the 2 business days you're present at the event, are you really able to forge lasting relationships that would be helpful to your state and worthy of Mr. Weimeyer's pronouncement? Really? The annual gathering of political and economic glitterati at Davos is as much an alpha charity event as it is a seminar. The topic of growing economic inequity around the world is usually concluded there with commitments from public and private haves to do more for the have-nots of the world. Our governor couldn't possibly fall into the former group, so that only leaves the latter for her. Attending Davos would have been a nice resume item for Ms. Raimondo. It's a unique perk of her office, perhaps, once you get past the method she used to fund her travel. In no way, though, would her junket to the Alps do anything for the hard-working, tax-paying men and women of the Ocean State. So, let's cut her some more slack. Since once everything about Davos went public, she wisely chose to cancel the trip and stand by to lead the emergency response to a 2-inch snowstorm. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us today Ralph Coppola of the Small Business Association of New England. And Ralph just participated in the Small Business Administration Summit. And a lot of businessmen showed up because they care about making it easier to do business here in Rhode Island. They actually want to be successful here because when they're successful, they get to hire more people and make Rhode Island a better place for us all to live. We just talked about education and how important that is to the business community. And we were talking that there was also a regulation subcommittee?
That's correct.
Okay, so tell us, we know that we're over-regulated in Rhode Island. So tell us what some of the conversation there was about.
From what I understand, and I wasn't, obviously, probably wasn't part of that committee, I was part of the healthcare committee, but the regulation committee, they've been working diligently over the past 10 years. I think this is 9 years. This is the 9th one that they've had, and the summit that they've had. And basically, we're very excited about the fact that e-permitting will be hopefully in place by February 10th. It's going to be more of, it's going to be, February 10th is going to be about, sometime in February, I'm sorry, and there's going to be about 10 communities that are going to be involved to begin with. And I believe there's additional communities that are going to be signed up, and hopefully the goal is to get every community in the state.
So, yeah, for our viewers, e-permitting, so if somebody wants to open up a company, they've got to get an electrical inspection, they got to get a plumbing inspection, the fire services have to sign off on their plan.
Correct.
The building inspector, the zoning, the whatever. There's a lot of different permits that they've got to get.
Correct.
And now they can do it all web-based.
Correct. What'll
so
happen,
that it can never be lost at the bottom of a pile.
That is correct. It's going to, everybody will have the access whereby one inspector and another inspector can be looking at the same set of plans at the same time and doing what they need to do from their perspective.
Oh, there's another thing. So it's not, I'm done, now it's your turn. They can all do it simultaneously.
Correct. And the process now is being followed on a computer so that you know exactly who's doing what and what part of the process and what needs to be done.
And who hasn't done his part of the job.
Correct.
So you can jiggle him a little.
That's correct. So we can speed up the process, and that's what we need to do.
Well, when you hear about somebody having an idea, they want to open a company, and it takes them 18 months to 2 years to get the door open, that's a year and a half of employment for somebody that's just not happening because it's being bogged down in the permitting process. So
that's correct. Oh, Jen,
has it gone live anywhere yet?
No, it's not live yet. I think there are other parts of the country that have it, though. It's not something new to.
Yeah, because I just wondered if there was some idea of how much faster it makes it. Does it cut off?
Well,
half the time, a third of the time that it would normally take.
Depends. Again, it's how quickly the various inspectors address it. But the fact is, it's going to improve the situation quite substantially in our state. Only because it's going to be there. The other thing is we're going to see more regulation that when it comes to the permitting process and the code process that's standardized throughout the state. I mean, it gets,
so no matter where you go, it's pretty much the same.
There's a degree of standardization from the perspective of, and I ran into the situation, I hired a plumber that was not in my town, that was from a different town, did not know what to do a specific job, and did not know exactly what the requirements were.
Because every town has changed it just a little bit.
Right, everybody has a different.
So a Dunkin' Donuts that opens up in Providence has a different set of regulations that someone that opens up in Charlestown.
Codes, correct, on the building code. So we're trying to see more of that. We're trying to go through the whole regulatory process to make, obviously, we need regulation, we need smart regulation that's going to make the businesses, do what they should do, but we also need the regulators to work with the business community to help them so that they are doing the right things without fining them for doing the wrong things.
Sure.
You need to be, the paradigm has to shift to, we're here to help you, really help you, instead of saying, don't tell us what you're doing wrong because we're going to fine you.
We want to catch you.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need to have a paradigm shift there also. So, I mean, we're all in this together.
And that's a tough thing. I've talked with so many business folks, and they don't talk in terms of we have a bad business climate. They say we have a hostile business climate. Right. So changing that paradigm, if it's what you wanted to say, where they know that they're there to help the business community. We want to help you
to do
obey the regulations, right? We're not here just to thump you.
And 99% of the business community wants to do the right thing.
They do. Yeah.
So, again, sometimes you don't know what the right thing is, but if you have somebody to help you do it, you certainly
don't wait until I do it wrong. Help me to do it right from the beginning. Yeah.
Correct. Which, I mean, theoretically, when you think about it, if you were talking about a student in school, you're certainly not going to get mad at the student
until they fail
and then fine them for failing. You're basically going to help them to do it right. So it's more of a learning process and a paradigm shift. So we like to see that shift happening. And it's just paring down some of the regulations that, were put in place 100 years ago that don't really make sense today, but are still on the books. So.
Well, and let's talk about those, because you mentioned that we in the General Assembly put in about 2,000 bills a year. And we don't seem to be able to repeal any of them. So once they're passed, they're there for perpetuity. I know probably the folks have heard about the water heater bill
Well, the boiler,
regulation
the
on boilers, but it was extended to any water heater in any establishment, right? And it was just one of those regulations that seemed more designed to take money out of businesses than to add any real value. And we did repeal it, but it took us 3 years to get one regulation off the books. And
which was probably obsolete.
We probably, it was probably obsolete for 40 years. And in the meantime, we probably added a few dozen new regulations onto the back of small business. So we can't have that slow a pace in making some rationality to our regulations.
The world is moving very quickly today. Everything is internet based, and we have access to information very fast, and things move fast. So we have to work to get it so the business community can get open, train people, have people on jobs, and move as quickly as they possibly can, because before you know it,
somebody you're in competition with the rest of the world nowadays.
Somebody else is going to be doing it, and by the time you get there, it's going to be too late.
I know one of the things in regulation that I always thought was so difficult is before they can adopt regulations, they have to have a public comment period.
Correct.
Do they tell you about the public comment period?
Yeah,
Probably not.
The funny part about that is I think that the last public comment period that I didn't even go to was when they increased the biweekly pay. They passed the law along, biweekly pay, and I believe that particular meeting was held on December 24th.
Oh, really good time to have a meeting.
So, if I'm not mistaken, on the 23rd, but it was right like in this period, like, why would you have a meeting on the 24th?
Because they don't want the comment. And I've talked with businessmen who say the regulation just shows up. They didn't even know that it was being promulgated. Right. They didn't have a chance to tell the agency what effect it would have on their ability to thrive as a business. So something's got to be done about that, and about the number of bills that we pass.
We recommended an economic impact study for anything that's submitted, so that you can
not just a fiscal note, but an economic note.
Right.
How is it going to hurt or help?
Correct. And that may...
What's the cost associated with it to our economy?
Correct. So,
all right.
Thank you.
We'll try to do it.
We'll
try to do it. It's not going to be easy.
Keep moving forward.
All right, and we're going to take a break right now. We have a couple more things to talk about. We'll be right back.
Last week, in the Providence Journal, Senator Ed O'Neill proffered the shocking opinion that the reason there's so much popular pushback to the big bond and the governor's truck tolling plan is that the average Rhode Islander doesn't trust his or her elected representatives as far as they can throw them. Are you kidding me? Senator, I'd say they don't even trust them half that far. Look at all the promises that have failed to materialize. We were told that the income from the state lottery was dedicated to public education. Buy a couple of tickets. It's for the kids. We were told that the state tax on gasoline was a dedicated revenue stream devoted to maintenance of roads and bridges. Sure. That's why we now have the big bond hanging over us. Lord knows what happens when those proceeds go to the general fund, too. All Rhode Island mayors, town managers, school superintendents, school committee members, zoning board members, judges, department heads, and thousands of other public officials are subject to Ethics Commission jurisdiction. So why should 113 members of the legislature be immune from investigation? Why? Because former Senate President William V. Irons needed a get-out-of-jail card one day. So until the Senate Judiciary Committee does more than just debate an amendment to fix that little problem, every year the skepticism will continue. Until present Senate President Teresa Priva-Weed brings the measure to the floor so senators can be put on record, the voters will ignore her other promises. Until the governor and the speaker come out publicly either for or against ethics in government, the sarcastic jokes will continue. By the way, Ed O'Neill knows all of this. Why do you think he's an independent? Are you kidding me?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mark Zaccaria. Thanks for tuning in to Common Sense TV. In fact, you've been tuning into Common Sense TV for 1 full year, or you will by the end of this month. The Common Sense production crew and all of the people on the air, in front of the camera, are planning to get together for a reception to celebrate that 1-year anniversary. And we'd like to invite all of you. It's on Sunday, the 31st of January from 1 till 3 in the afternoon. It's at Perella's Restaurant in 311 Metacom Avenue in Warren, Rhode Island. And you can find out all of the details on the GatsbyProject.com website on the Common Sense TV page. We'd love to have you come down. Tell us what you like, what you dislike. Give us some suggestions about what we can do. And if you make suggestions that are too ludicrous, what we'll say is, are you kidding me?
Welcome back to Common Sense Rhode Island. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us today Ralph Coppola of the Small Business Association of New England. Ralph has been telling us about the Small Business Summit that was just held at Bryant University. And you were the chairman of the healthcare subcommittee.
Correct.
For a long time, businesses were complaining about the cost of healthcare, that it was increasing at double digits every year. Has that changed?
It has not. As a matter of fact, businesses are still complaining about the cost. It is the second highest cost to the business community, other than payroll. Being that the case, it's a cost that really needs to be, we really have to address that particular cost and find ways that we can keep that cost from rising at the rate it's rising, and ultimately, hopefully, maybe move it to a point where it's not rising at all.
So is it still going up by the 12 and 15% a year?
Yeah, it's moderated a little bit, I think, over the past couple of years, depending on the carrier. It's in the 8 to 10 range right now, which is still...
It's a lot.
If you still do the math, it's a lot when ultimately you're in an environment where you can't raise the price of your products to make up for the extra costs that you have to incur for health care.
You know, I'm kind of surprised by that, because with Obamacare, such large deductibles came in, right? If you go on the exchange, there's $3,000, $5,000, $7,000 deductibles when you buy policies on there. So I would have thought that would bring the premium down.
When you're looking at like a high deductible health care, which an HRA health insurance, what you're doing is you're making the consumer become more educated in the process. That necessarily doesn't have an immediate effect on bringing the cost down, number one. And number two, you could probably get to the same result through education of the consumer. So
we didn't need Obamacare. We just needed to educate the consumer better.
We did not need Obamacare. Obamacare was not well thought out from my perspective. We certainly need to take care of our citizens in this country,
sure.
and that's an important thing. But the way this was pushed upon the American people was just appalling.
And it has not been the panacea for the small business community either.
It has not. And as a matter of fact, there was an individual that got hurt, and it was on the news last night, that ultimately they're starting a GoFundMe page for this person to cover the medical costs because they didn't have health insurance. And I was like, where was Obamacare? Where did that come into play? Everybody's supposed to have insurance for the most part, and this wasn't the case. So it's not working the way it's supposed to, and that's too bad, because it was a lot of money that was spent by the American
I honestly
people.
kind of think of it as catastrophic health policies, because when you have a deductible that's that large, you only use it when you're in an accident or something horrible has happened to you, right? It's not...
Well, that's the other issue with life, right?
You're not getting the regular care because you have to pay that deductible first.
And that can have an adverse effect from a perspective of if the person doesn't get to the hospital soon enough, the cost of that of maybe
could be higher.
Could be much higher, and it could turn into something that's a much more serious situation, and the costs, can be a lot more higher at that point. So
now, you were saying though that the business community, they did have some asks for the insurance industry, and kind of they want to be able to compare policies in a more forthright way.
Yeah, the business community would like to see more of a case where they can have a comparison of what they're getting from each provider.
In plain English.
In plain English, and no surprises afterwards after they move from provider A to provider B. So for those of you who are familiar with Medicare has, I believe it goes from A to F. One of the
those Medigap policies.
Right, the Medigap policies, and those policies are regulated by the U.S. government, and they basically spell out the coverage that each of those policies will give you. We would like to see something where, it's the same with the business community. There may be 10 or whatever, 15 policies, but each one has to fit in a certain definition. So the business person can look at, I like policy F, and I want to get that for my employees, or whatever the case may be.
But just more understandable. I know that this is going to be covered for my employees. I know this many doctors are in it, that this many procedures are inside of it, what have you.
So it's all standardized, so you know exactly what you're getting and what you're paying for what you're getting.
Of course, here in Rhode Island, we have the highest number of mandates on our health policies. So we could use some mandate relief, and maybe take some of the things and make them riders, so that if you want to be covered for in vitro fertilization or autism or these things, you buy a rider, and there's a more essential package, and then the business community could pick off riders instead of.
We'd like to do an audit, and I think one of the things that we're going to try to do is get an audit on exactly what are all these mandates, exactly what is the effect of these mandates. And from what I understand, there are some mandates that say that you have to use a particular form for a particular procedure, and only that form can be used. So, I mean, that's the first thing.
What does it add to the cost?
Correct. It's why would we need a form that's going to cost more money? And those are the things we certainly have to look at. I mean,
we have 71 or 72 mandates.
Right, we have a lot of mandates.
And the average in the United States is 43. So we're paying for a whole lot of extra mandates.
Correct.
That the average family might not need or want.
Correct.
Yeah. And that goes for the business community. You're paying for a lot of extra coverages that your employees probably don't access.
Right, exactly. So we have to look at ways of streamlining what's available. We need more transparency in the process. I think the transparency is really an important issue here. So everything is and we're moving to a society where everything is becoming more transparent, which is a good thing. So we need more transparency also. A couple other things that can your members buy their insurance through SBANE? Do you have a group policy? We do not. From what I understand, there are some states. I know, like the chambers allow it. There are some states. The chambers, I don't think the chambers allow it anymore either.
Okay. I think there might be a law that prevents that in Rhode Island.
Right. There are a couple of associations that do allow it and who have it available. But what I understand, there are some states that are not starting to market their insurance back through the chambers again.
Through chambers, through like the Rhode Island Manufacturing Association, through SBANE. If you could, as an association, allow members to buy it as a group, that might
help. Also,
I think there's a law against it. I might be putting in a bill to stop that so that you guys can do that. Just might be doing that.
Well, I mean, that would be interesting to get rid of an anti-competitive law, I guess, for lack of a better word.
And you have to be competitive. You really do.
It's all exactly.
Small businesses aren't just the ones selling paint. They are also small manufacturers, small companies that are trying to market to the world. I mean, you had mentioned emerging markets. You had an emerging markets subcommittee that was saying we're having a hard time getting our products into the emerging markets.
Right. So it's competition. Healthy competition is good because it's obviously we all walk around with cell phones today, and that competition created what we have today, and I think healthy competition is good for all of us. It gives us a better product,
But we have to realize that as a state we're competing with other states.
We are competing with other states.
And with other countries.
Right, we are, and we are.
And on that happy note, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
As House members start filing proposed bills for the new session, there seem to be some common themes emerging. Judging by their submissions so far, one thing our state representatives seem to really dislike is educational options for Rhode Island's children. Are you kidding me? It's true. Check out House Bills 7051, 7066, and 7067 just for starters. A spread of sponsors put these and other bills like them into play already. They all either make it more difficult to open or expand a charter school in Rhode Island, or more expensive to attend one already in place. The recent round of PARC scores seem to point to difficulties in traditional public schools across our state. Meanwhile, the average charter school or mayoral academy has a waiting list of students eager to get in. Is that the free market at work? Well, if so, why are reps such as Serpa, O'Grady, O'Brien, Fogarty, Barros, Coughlin, and many others trying to restrict the growth of these alternative schools? Do you think there are special interests involved? Is this trend in Ocean State legislation an attempt to feather the beds of a small but powerful constituency? Like the NEARI, perhaps? Wait, what? Our elected officials throwing the kids under the bus to curry favor with their supporters in the teachers' union? Are you kidding me?
Welcome back to Common Sense Rhode Island. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us Ralph Coppola of the Small Business Association of New England, and we're talking about the summit that the small business community had at Bryant recently. You know, one of the subcommittees that I'm interested in knowing what they came up with was the tax policy committee, because a lot of companies that you mentioned healthcare as being the second most expensive item on their spreadsheet. Taxes have to be up there too.
Taxes are up there for all of us, but they're certainly up there for the business community. And, you know, taxes, ultimately, we have to remain competitive as a state for our tax policy, and that's one of the things that concerns us in the business community, because we're really not as competitive as we should be.
Yeah, I noticed that we have no warehouses in Rhode Island. If you think about it, and sometimes when you just drive over the line to Massachusetts, you'll see the big Home Depot warehouse distribution center, or you'll see one for who knows,
BJ's in Franklin, or wherever that is.
And
Framingham.
That's tax policy that drove those jobs and those distribution centers out of Rhode Island.
Plus, you got Amazon right now going to Fall
And
River,
we lost Amazon because of tax policy.
Right.
So a lot of the jobs, the companies that should be domiciled here and should be providing jobs here, have moved to Massachusetts because of tax policy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So it's really, really important. I remember I was getting my hair done one day, and my hairdresser said, well, what are you going to do for us small businesses? And I said to her, well, what do you want me to do? And she said, property taxes, they're killing me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They took an entire month's salary from her. Right? Every year. 1 month went to property taxes. And she said, help us with that. Difficult for me at the state level, and yet a lot of the stuff that we do at the state level affects property taxes, and certainly affects income taxes and corporate taxes. But did they have any specifics?
Well, I think one of the things is we wanted to see more of a standard appeal process for so if somebody is appealing their property tax, the process is done, I believe, on the town level. We want to see that. And one of the recommendations is to have a property tax court who is very familiar with real estate and taxes, and they can make a decision because they are experts in the field.
So you mean if something is assessed for more than it's worth?
Correct. And if you feel that you're not being taxed correctly, or there's something wrong with the tax structure, you can go to that particular court for determination on what the assessed value would be, and if the taxes are fair and equitable to the business.
So would that be just for businesses or for residential as well?
I'm sure it would be for everyone. So if you felt that your home was not taxed correctly, you could go to this particular court, and they make a determination based upon the findings that they come up with, and they would be knowledgeable about the particular determination, because that's what they would be doing mostly. That was one of the recommendations. The other was basically we want to phase in a tiered system for auto business, it's phase out the tiered system. So there's a tiered system in some cities that your automobile, your business taxes, your personal property taxes, and your inventory taxes, which is any tangible taxes, which is on the equipment, they could be at different levels.
Yeah.
And that's, and sometimes which is fair, but it's easier to tax the business community in a certain place because they're not voters. So they kind of get pushed over here, and then,
Actually, I did some research on that. I don't know what the answer is, but there are some communities out there where there's the residential rate, and then a commercial rate might be, 50% more, and then the intangible rate might be double what the residential rate is.
Right.
And that's just on your equipment, right? Your desks, your phones,
Correct.
Your computers.
Typewriter.
The stuff that you might... typewriter, typewriter. But the stuff that you have on your shelves that you're trying to sell.
Right.
And I mean, just talk about sapping the competitiveness out of a company.
Right. You're taxing the tools to do business with.
Yeah.
And those are your tools. Those are the tools you need to do business with. So I mean, that certainly needs to be addressed. And we'd like to also, I mean, one of the things the business community also wants to see is a standardized auto tax throughout the state.
In Providence, it's very, very high.
We have a discrepancy in auto tax in this state. It's got to be a 4 times one town. So Providence is probably 4 times higher on auto tax than the lowest town in the state.
Yeah, I know Massachusetts did have a kind of a statewide rate for their cars.
Correct. So it's more of an excise tax. It's more of a statewide, and they can do it on a statewide basis, and just have the towns collect those, the taxes on the cars that are in their particular towns. It might have an adverse effect on some of the lower tax towns versus the higher tax towns, because you might see more vehicles migrating back to the higher tax town than the lower tax town.
Now, in the last session, there was some good news for businesses, right? The sales tax on your electricity
for businesses
was removed.
Yep, that was removed.
Which was a good thing, because electricity, I mean, businesses use so much of it, and that sales tax alone must have been a huge item. We only took $50 off the minimum tax. That we need to do more work on that. But
there's some recommendations at the summit that we just eliminate that. Just eliminate that particular tax. Just it's a minimum corporate tax when you're paying a corporate tax, and if you can't afford to, if you're not being taxed on the corporate level, then really you don't have enough income to pay the tax. So sometimes it becomes a point where we're taxing the people that can least afford it.
Yeah.
And that's not fair. The other thing that I think is important is the estate taxes. We need to keep moving that bar higher.
Well, for businesses, and some folks might think that that's, businesses are already rich. Why would you give them a higher exemption? But what ends up happening is businesses aren't just money. They are equipment.
Correct.
Right? They're a building. They're desks and computers. And if you're a small business, your wealth might just be tied up into those things that are almost impossible to sell. If the owner dies and hasn't passed it on somehow with special estate planning that's very expensive, then they could end up having to sell the equipment, to sell the building, and really damage their ability to exist and still provide those jobs. Or they have to get a
loan to survive.
And it cripples them.
One of the things that we're proposing this year is a $5 million exemption for any business that is transferred from a family member to a family member. There will be no estate tax, and there'll be a look-back provision.
So they have to stay in business a certain amount of time. So they have to stay in business.
So that would, number one, it would keep them here. Number two, it would prevent some of these families from selling off the businesses and just taking the money, because you'd be avoiding a major tax.
When you have that estate tax, it can hobble them so much that they can't stay in business.
Correct.
So it's really about making the jobs climate stronger here.
Absolutely.
We need to keep our kids in the state.
That's correct, and we need to do everything we possibly can to do that. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a good summit.
We did. The summit was excellent.
Yeah.
It was a very good summit. A
Right.
lot happened, and a lot of good ideas came out of it.
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing some of the stuff you talked about with us. This was our 52nd episode. Hope you stay around for the next 52.
The front page of the January 11th, 2016 edition of the Wall Street Journal carried this headline, quote, "Car insurers find tracking is a tough sell," unquote. Well, got my attention, so I decided to look into my car insurance again to see what was happening at USAA. Went to the website and called up my insurance documents. I wanted to compare my costs with the averages across the country and to see if USAA was offering to put a tracking device in my car. Nope. So the issue here today is going to be privacy. Now, car insurance is all about risk. If an insurance company wants to stay in business, it has to issue policies that bring in more money than they have to spend on claims. Over time, these astute statisticians used age, gender, car type, and driving records, tickets and crashes, to set rates. But they also had to consider all the various 51 states where lawmakers have created various rules the insurers have to follow. Now, some states have done very well holding down car insurance costs. Now, that comparison in a minute. Going back to how rates are set, I looked at my policy and found out that my cost for 3 cars that we have was $1,342 for a full year. Now, that didn't seem so bad considering what it was when I had 3 kids on the policy. Now I get premium discounts for annual mileage, anti-theft, clear record, no tickets and crashes lately, daytime running lights, multi-car, new vehicle, passive restraints, and lastly, the premier driver discount. Yep. In the jargon, my wife and I are preferred risk customers. You want to be that versus standard or worse yet, non-standard, the high-risk crowd. So I save lots of money under the current rules. But to the point of the Wall Street Journal article, some insurance carriers are looking at usage pricing. They want to put the computers of this world to use monitoring your actual driving. There are now sensors allowed by car owners that track the actual usage of the vehicle. Some are attached to the car, others are smartphone apps that use GPS links to watch over the car. Your driving day is monitored and stored for use by the insurance companies. Now, the owners currently have to agree in hopes that their wonderful driving will result in a reduction to their insurance costs. Some prognosticators have stated that over the long term, this process is inevitable. So, quote, privacy will be shifting from being a right to becoming a good that is purchased. I wondered what the companies doing this have found out about our driving. Now, here are a few things that I found out. By checking credit histories, the insurers have come to understand that financially responsible people are better drivers. A mile driven at 2 a.m. is, in general, 4 or 5 times riskier than one driven at 7 a.m. Drivers that slam on their brakes more than 8 times every 500 miles are 73% more likely to get in an accident over a 1-year period. And for us older drivers, those of us who fail to yield at intersections pose more of a risk than those of us who get speeding tickets. How about gender differences? Seems that the average married male is 3% more likely to be in an accident than a married female. I thought we already knew that women have better driving records. Before I left this subject, I checked out how Rhode Island was doing with its insurance costs in comparison to the rest of the country. Now, I do admit that before I actually saw the numbers, I was biased to believe we were once again at the bottom of the food chain. So it was not a surprise to find that the insurance.com folks who do an annual comparison ranked Rhode Island 8th worst in the nation. Using the methodology they have used for years, these folks put us in the top 10 worst. Our number was $1,656,
Worst, Michigan at $2,476. Best, Maine at $805. Here are the factors that seem to influence the scorecard. State laws, local court systems, traffic, crime rates, competition amongst insurers, big one, and lastly, the percent of uninsured drivers. What all this means is we live in a state that costs more to insure our cars than our neighbors have to pay. I would like to see a legislator take this on and propose legislative solutions to improve our standing. Don't you agree? Thank you for watching, and God bless.